and welcome to the webinar. If you can hear me, just enter that yes, I can hear you in the chat so that I know that we are all together. I'm going to just set us onto record, make a few adjustments. And just making a few adjustments. It looks as if you can hear me. Great. And you figured out how to use the chat. In a few minutes, we're also going to be using the Q&A, which is to the right of the chat. And fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen so that you can. One second. So you can see my presentation, and then we'll get going. Great, everyone, and welcome to Why HR Fell Behind in Reskilling Caribbean Companies, the specific case of COVID-19. I'm Francis Wade, and on behalf of Caribbean HR Forum, it's great to have you here. To give you an idea of what you just saw, if you joined a few minutes ago, but you couldn't quite figure out what was happening. Let's see if I can forward the screen. So we're using a platform called Remote tonight. It has two modes. One mode is presentation mode, which is the mode that we're in right now. As you can see, I'm talking and you can hear me, but the only communication I can have with you is via the chat. So your microphone is muted. And the mode that we came from, and the one that we'll go back to in more than a few minutes, but later on in the evening, is called conference room mode. And in conference room mode, you'll have a chance to meet with other folks at your table and have a conversation with them. So two modes. And today's webinar, how it'll work tonight is that I'll be introducing our discussion topic. I'll be raising some important questions that we'll be tackling here at Caribbean HR Forum for the next year. You're not going to find any quick tips and quick answers and kind of trivial we're hoping to have a real discussion to kickstart a year of something special. So we're starting off the year with this particular activity. I'll be inviting Nazir Sultan and Simone Bo to join us in a panel discussion to discuss the ideas that I've just shared or will just share. And then we'll break out back to the virtual tables in the conference room mode, conference table mode. And I'll ask you to answer a few questions and then report back here once you're done in presentation mode. It's not difficult. All you'll have to do is just go with the flow because I'm the one who has the controls with respect to what mode we're in. So all you need to do is just go with the flow. So you report back the answer to the questions, and then finally we'll close up with some next steps. And based on how much time we have at the very end, we'll do some networking. Once again, at the virtual conference tables. Okay, so we're going to end at 7:15 sharp. The program shuts you down at 7:15 Jamaica time, 8:15 Trinidad time. So let's get going. So as I said, this is about raising some important questions. But those of us who are around HR, the HR training and organizational development, and have worked in companies in the region, remember a time, if we're old enough, back in the 2000s, when companies had learning departments. They had L&D professionals. They had people who specialized in only delivering training. Now, I'm saying it like that because it's a bit of a setup. Because I imagine you already know that lots of companies don't have a single L&D professional any longer. Courtesy of the 2008 recession. Maybe it even started before that. But cost cutting, the mandate to do only the most essential training and nothing more, was passed down from the executive team to heads of human resources. And as we say here in the Caribbean, training is always the first thing to get cut. So training departments got cut, training budgets got cut, training individuals, they just weren't hired any longer. And the net result, I'll argue, is threefold. This is what got us sort of concerned and inspired here at Carib HR Forum. The first is that HR has become reactive. So that the dictates about what HR should or shouldn't do hasn't come from inside the human resource function. It's come from outside. It's come from the board. It's come from CEOs. Arguably, it came from the recession. So a CEO or an MD might say, I'm just doing what I need to do to keep the company afloat. And it's just what we have to do. The only training that you need to do is absolutely essential training, which is training people to do specific parts of the job that they can't teach themselves. So they need to learn how to use the new system. So we got to teach them how to do that. So HR, as a result, became responsive and reactive. A lot of HR people I know are very faithful to the cause. So essentially, they saluted the flag and said, yes, sir, yes, boss. Thinking and hoping in the back of their minds that the time will come again when the company is doing well, the economies of the Caribbean turn, and we'll go back to doing the kind of training that we used to do. So in reaction to financial pressure, they followed suit and cut the training. As you could imagine, as you know, HR's own growth was also stymied. It became a matter of train others before training yourself in terms of L&D professionals and ultimately HR managers. Why? Well, if you could barely argue for training for the general population, it'd be really difficult to say, HR needs to do some retooling. We need to improve our skills. It's tough to go to a CEO who's in cost-cutting mode and argue for an investment in HR's development and HR's training. Difficult, if not impossible, and most didn't. Consequently, HR's skills stopped improving as fast as it could. That lots of HR professionals essentially got the message that I needed to learn all I needed to learn back in school. And the company is no longer putting any time or effort or budget into my development. As a result, they stopped developing themselves. We stopped developing ourselves. A natural consequence of the pressures that the companies were under. And then, unfortunately, as you know, even as the pressure lifted, that didn't quite change. However, at the same time, all of this was happening. Lots of departments in the company were seeking their own training. I spoke to a CIO of a major telecom here in the region, and he told me that when a new technology comes out, which is like almost every other week in his case, he assigned it to an individual in his group, someone who reports to him. And that person would go and study the topic for a month or two, and then come back and be the expert and then present the topic to the rest of the group, because that was the only way they could keep up with the advance in technology. That was the only way they could keep abreast. Now, that's an innovative approach. It didn't, in the telling of the story, didn't involve the human resource function, didn't involve the training and development people, and they were there. But this was all done in-house. So what's happened? It's a small microcosm of what's happened in general, which is that people are seeking their own training. How well they're doing that? Well, let's just say they were kind of making do. YouTube videos, podcasts, downloading papers, reading blogs, some of it fake news, some of it not real, some of it not useful. But when their backs were against the wall, they had to go sort of find a way. Some did, because that's not true of every department in most companies. So those three trends were happening, and we noticed them around the middle of last year. And he said, we've got to do something about this here at Carib HR Forum. Got to do more than just sit back and watch it happen, watch it unfold. And then along came our friend, COVID-19. And all of a sudden, everything exploded. So what COVID-19 did was to put a hard edge on each of these three trends. Although they were all happening, all of a sudden, CEOs were turning around, and the kind of things they were saying were, I'm hearing them saying no. As of about mid-March, I want to blank, but my people don't know how. So I'd like for you to fill in the answer to that question, that statement in the chat. I want to do what? What have you heard executives saying that they want to do, but complaining that their people don't know how to do it? Work virtually. I want to work virtually. I want my people to work virtually, but my people don't know how. And there's so many elements to that. You guys could probably break them down. Let's see if you can get some more detail below work virtually. What are some of the challenges that CEOs realize people have? Okay, not technology challenged. So I want people to embrace technology, but they don't know how. So there's some, unfortunately, a few in HR who heard about Zoom for the first time somewhere in the last few weeks. Didn't know it existed, never used it, weren't aware of it, and are just finding out about Zoom. One of the complaints I heard just this week was that I don't want to. So I don't want my managers to micromanage, but they don't know any other way. So they're using the stay at home way of working. They're treating it as if you're in the chair next to me. So they're zooming into their employees' business every few minutes, thinking that that's the way you manage someone who's remote. Because if you had to watch them when they were right beside you, you really have to study whatever the heck they're doing, now that you actually can't see them. So the way you compensate for not seeing them is by making sure they're on Zoom. It's another answer. I don't know how to manage the performance of those who work from home. Absolutely. Because the old way of managing performance, a lot of it was hands-on, a lot of it was over the shoulder, a lot of it was, as a CEO explained to me, oh, we don't believe in cubicles. We have open office. I said, well, why? Because it's shown to reduce productivity. Oh, we have to see everyone. That's why. This is what someone else just said. Trisha said, unable to monitor staff and ensure work is done. That's exactly what I just said. Then he says they don't know how to manage their time away from the workplace. And as you probably know, lots of people are now managing time, meals, kids, pets, spouses, parents. They're managing households of activity that they never had to manage before. Okay, it's a long list. I'm going to have to move on. But we're on the right page here, that all of a sudden CEOs are realizing that there are these gaps. So I grabbed a quote from Dwight Eisenhower. He very wisely said, plans are nothing. Planning is everything. Real smart guy. Hold on, let me just blow up his, yep, so you can see that. And I just took that and I said, well, that's true, but in our case, there's something a little extra. Case of HR. Skills are useful for a while until they aren't. Learning is everything. So we've had to pick up some unusual skills in this time of COVID-19. All of a sudden, people have to do things that they probably would never do before. We probably won't do things like temperature checks, and how do you do that when people walk in the door so that they don't infect the rest of the workplace? That probably won't happen in the future. So that's not a skill that's going to last. But the learning, the underlying learning is really what's important. And some of the gaps that the CEOs have mentioned, that I've sort of put them into groups, I'd say that they're employee gaps. So that some of the employee gaps are gaps in skills, and there's gaps in knowledge and their relationships. How do you keep up work relationships with customers or with your own boss or your CEO while you're away? And how do you communicate in this digital environment all of a sudden, and people don't know how to do it. But below the specifics of how you do something, there is a deeper cut I'll invite us to look at, which is that employees are having a tough time managing their own self-learning and their own self-care. So they don't know how to get better at the things that they have to do for the first time. They've never had to learn so many new things for the first time. If anything, self-learning was slow, as I indicated in the 3 trends that I mentioned before. Now it's been turbocharged, and now they need this new capacity to go pick up new skills, find out where they are, learn how to do them really quickly, and execute them in a matter of days and sometimes even hours. Also, and this came courtesy of a pre-webinar call with Nazir and Simone, self-care. Employees need to learn how to take care of themselves in this new way. Why? Because all of a sudden the stresses, the depression, suicides are up. Spousal and child abuse and domestic violence are all increasing because everyone is at home under stress, and employees are asking, how do I improve my skills at working with my family when we're all under stress? So let's just imagine that these are a few of the gaps that all of a sudden popped up. So last year we said, we want next year to be the year that HR puts on its own mask first. So that piece of advice that they give you when you're on an airplane, that you put your mask on first before taking care of a small child or a parent or someone else. And the whole idea is pretty obvious. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll be in no shape to take care of others. So we thought that this would be a decent theme last year. It's a good idea in theory, right? Well, this is the year for this particular point of view, that HR needs to put on its own mask first. And the kind of gaps, if HR were to put on its own mask first this year, some of the gaps that you would see filled would be, how would HR cope with this reset? How would HR reskill itself? How would HR retool, pick up brand new techniques, software, hardware? How would HR replenish itself? Because right now, as I talk to people on Caribbean HR Forum, there's a heck of a lot of people who are sacrificing on behalf of their employees. What would it be like to flip the script just a bit so that in this time of stress and very difficult challenges, HR takes care of itself? And you came out of the year taking care of yourself at the level that is at the level of a role model, where HR takes supreme care of itself, and everyone in the company said, HR people really take care of themselves. HR people are really good at resetting and reskilling and retooling, so that instead of sacrificing and giving up, HR instead became the leader. So that's let's say the easy part of the message. The hard part of the message is that this is going to require technology. And ever since we started Caribbean HR Forum back in 2003, we've had a sort of inside joke. HR folks do not like technology, and they're not the most technologically able. Okay, that was kind of cute in the past, but now it's a necessity. Why? Because there's no way to lead the charge when it comes to this particular reset without using technology. There's no way to find the information that you need, different parts of the internet, that will help someone to reskill. There's no way for HR to reskill itself without being skillful at finding information on the internet. And there are people out there who are looking to all different kinds of training, who are trying to develop their skills and don't have the wherewithal to do it. HR needs to be the expert at being the channel, figuring out how to do it. Okay, so having said all of that, here's why we're here. I'm gonna turn on my light. What do we want? What do you want for yourself for 2020 to 2021? What would this kind of self-care look like? So I'm not going to answer the question right now. I'm going to have you answer it in a few, but I'm going to invite up a couple of folks that I mentioned before to join me on the platform. Let's see if I can bring them up. Nazir Sultan. Naz, let's see if I can get you up here. Okay. It's not showing up yet, but also Simone Bowl. Oh, there we go. Yes. Okay, I'm going to take off my share screen. I'm not seeing. Hi, Simone.
Hi, Francis. Hi, everyone. I was
Great. You're coming through loud.
Photo, that pre-COVID-19 photo.
I know.
Hi,
having a little difficulty promoting, getting Naz up on the screen, though. Let's see.
I saw him as already a presenter, a speaker.
Right, I know. Let's see. I should be able to double click on and just have him show up, but for some reason he's not. I'm not being able to bring him on. Can't demote him. Let's see what we can do here. Technology.
I know.
Nazir, if you're hearing me, could you log out and log back in, or could you refresh your screen? Sometimes that helps. Just refresh your screen. And let's see if it brings you on. Okay, he just disappeared, so I think he's doing that. Great, he should show up. He should be here. Oh, well, we'll have to go ahead, Simone. I'm sorry, we won't get Naz. Naz is from Trinidad and Tobago, and Simone is from the Bahamas. Simone, what do you make of all that I've said so far and the direction that we hope to go in? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that so often HR gets the short end of the stick, and whatever training dollars are allocated, sometimes, oh, here he is. He's coming. Yay.
Oh, here he is. Naz, how are you?
I'm fine, man. Fine.
Great. We can hear you loud and clear. Wonderful. Great. Go ahead, Simone.
Yeah, whatever training dollars we get, as someone said in the chat, we spread it out, and we're trying to spread it around to everyone else. And that's Tracy. Yeah, Tracy, I was trying to remember who said that. And we leave ourselves for the last. So you either have to be very self-motivated to pursue your own development as an HR professional, or think about it. You just get caught up in the transactional work of HR, and you're doing the day-to-day, and you're putting out fires all the time. And, you just get so caught up in that aspect of the work that you really don't think about yourself, and most days you're just trying to get a good night's sleep and get back to do it all over again. Right. But as we can see, that is not helping us. It's not helping our organizations either. And so when we have these situations like a crisis of some kind, whether that is a recession, whether that is a hurricane, an earthquake, drought or flood, whatever it is that we're going through, as HR professionals, we have to lead the way. And we have to lead the way by knowing the way in a certain sense. We're not going to know everything. As leaders, we're all figuring this out. But if we're staying ahead and we're watching trends and we're tooling ourselves, then we are more apt to be visionary when something like this happens. And so that when we need to pivot, we're able to pivot and pivot very quickly. So I totally
Right.
agree with
Agreed.
you. And actually, I didn't even think about this. Even when you think about reskilling, you still thinking about this team and not thinking about yourself. But, you're absolutely right.
Right. Right. Those of us who go to conferences know that they've gotten smaller over the years, HR conferences. And the days when
Yes.
folks were sent, people remember these days, sent abroad for 3 weeks of training as HR, 3 solid weeks. You could barely get to go to a local conference, let alone an overseas conference, let alone some mega training like 3 weeks. Naz, what do you make? I know you have a unique perspective on all this.
Well, you are correct in saying that in a way we are reactive. I think we either didn't show up, we were absent, and when we did show up at the table, we were reactive. And Simone used the concept of a vision. The truth is, no one could have forecasted the behavior of this beast, COVID-19. It is a different kind of challenge. We are accustomed to deal with challenges that are discrete, like floods and hurricanes and fire. This enemy is not going away.
Right.
Is it a skirmish? Will it revisit? And therefore, you use the term reset. The nearest I came up in terms of my working history with something that we can learn from, I want to go back to Y2K. You remember the Y2K challenge?
Yeah.
When we think
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
fall off the sky, etc.
Yeah.
I think when you look back, that was a successful global, national, organizational response.
Right.
So we have a place we can go and learn some lessons. However,
Right.
that was related to things, technology. This time we are talking about lives. We are talking about people. My God,
Right.
HR, if ever you had a claim at the table, we are dealing with people now. We are dealing with people. Over the last 2 decades, I've been pushing agenda at the regional conferences. Know your business. You have done more in talking about embracing the technology. We got, in terms of putting on this mask, to be evidential, to begin to develop our own theories. If this is used, this is the result. We have to stop the anecdotal chatter.
Right.
The technology embrace, well-being as the engagement agenda was something I spoke on last year at the TNT conference.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are talking about in your slides, etc., is a installation of human centricity as a critical design feature. Lockdown is not a strategy. Lockdown is just to buy some time to respond. And I have a framework that I think I borrowed from health. I think we have to talk about reopening. We have to talk about recalibration. We have to talk about reinforcements. And we have to talk about resilient learning. Resilient learning.
Right. I've had a bit of experience with friends who suffer from depression, and there's two things that I've two, maybe more than two, but there's two things that come to mind when I think about things that have been proven by research to help when somebody is feeling depressed. So one is pretty simple. It's making a frequent list of things that you're grateful for. And we've all heard that, right? We've all heard that that's good advice. It's proven by many, many studies, psychological studies, to show that it makes a difference. And it's usually best done going to bed before you go to bed at night. So I used to do one every week, and then I read the research and I started to do it just before going to bed at night. And it helps ward off depression. And the second is exercise. So exercise is shown to have a greater effect than drugs on someone being depressed. So I thought of those two examples. And in the light of what you're saying, I thought, how many HR managers know those two pieces of information? First thing. Second, how many are using it for themselves in their own HR departments? And then thirdly, how many of them are programmizing what I just said and getting it into the mindset of people, of their staff, every single person? Because if they're not stressed yet, the chances are they're going to be stressed soon. But it's just one example of operationalizing something that has been out there for a long time. What are some of the practical things, guys, that can be done if I'm an HR manager? My boss is telling me, okay, we need to now look at laying off a few people, so get yourself ready. And you know that sometimes that leads to consequences like HR being laid off as the last person. So you're at risk and other people are at risk. What are some of the things that HR manager can do practically as they now face and find themselves sort of barely struggling to stay afloat in the environment they're in right now?
Number one, take care of yourself. That's not selfish. Develop in this lockdown mode some wellness routines, exercise, eat well, get community going. That's one I'd like to offer off the bat. HR people, put on your mask. Do some wellness routine starting tomorrow. In fact, not starting tomorrow, starting tonight. Get good sleep.
Right. And some companies have I think so. No, this happened long before COVID. Some companies set up teams and cohorts, and they had competitions between teams with respect to wellness. And in those companies, from what I hear, wellness took off because it became something that everybody had to participate in, because your team, you couldn't let your team down. So having it gamified to some degree is also, and you can do all of that still using something like Zoom, right?
Yeah, in actual fact, we have been doing that. Before this all happened, we had a 90-day wellness challenge going on. And so we were having pop-up wellness events and things like that, where people could actually go outside and do certain things. And so now, because this has happened, we've used Zoom. So the guy that works with us, who is a wellness person, he does a 45-minute Zoom session, and he does it as a pop-up. So it's kind of random, unexpected, but it happens every week. Just don't know which day of the week it'll be, but he will come on and he will do that. We also connected with our insurance provider because they have a virtual wellness program, and they have actually had to kind of figure out how they're going to stay relevant. And so they already had a blog, but now they're transitioning their wellness program to be fully online. And so they did a free lunch and learn, a virtual lunch and learn, where they talked about how food affects your future. And so, of course, everybody's been talking about how people are overeating and just binge eating, emotional eating during the lockdown. And so he talked about proper nutrition, about reading the labels and the things that we should be doing as it relates to food. And then they shared the online resource, through the wellness blog that they have. And one of the first things that we actually did was to do some virtual sessions to try to connect the team. And the very first one we did was coping with stress, the stress of crisis. And so we actually have been using Teams as a platform, which is a part of the Microsoft package that we were never using. We didn't know existed. So thank God for IT. They're like, we're paying for Zoom, and do you realize we're paying for this whole Microsoft suite, and all of this stuff is in here. And so we've been using Teams, and we've been doing it's turned out to be a weekly virtual session that we call Coping Conversations. And so it's all about, we've dealt with stress, we've dealt with embracing change, we've dealt with how to work remotely, because that, of course, is completely new to everyone. And then we incorporated an additional session. So now we have about 3 things going on in the week. And we have found the engagement and the participation through the roof. When I think about it, I say, I've been a trainer my whole career, and you fight to get people into sessions. We have been averaging 90 people per session. This Tuesday, yesterday, we had about 100 people on the session. And then tomorrow we will have a tech session. So we have our IT team covering how to use these tools in Microsoft. So tomorrow they'll be covering Planner. You should like that one, Francis. That's a task management tool. And then we will do another wellness session. We actually had requests for people asking for mental health sessions. And so we will have a mental health session tomorrow by the psychiatrist that we have on retainer, who offers the EAP service, which hasn't really been utilized. But now people are asking, we need mental health help. And so we're offering that as a lunch and learn tomorrow. And so the engagement has really been way more than we expected, and the feedback has been phenomenal. People are sharing ideas of other things that we can offer. And so next month, we will focus on all things for this organization. So we'll be the organization just did a rewrite of the vision and mission and all of that. So we're planning a reorientation session where we will be going over mission, the vision, the core values, and just getting people connected. And as Nas said, ready for this reopen, because we are tourism. So we need to be ready. We can't wait until they open the borders to be scrambling around trying to decide, what are we going to do and how are we going to get people to be comfortable coming back to the Bahamas.
Right. If there's one thing I want us to take away from our discussion, guys, is the notion that we can be here for each other, because this little 15 minutes that we spent talking, the ideas I've heard for the first time are way off the chart, and I would never have thought of these things without you guys. And I think our guys, those of you who are here on the webinar would agree that having each other and having the right context to ask and answer these kinds of questions and share the responses with each other is what HR could be about right now. So I want to prove to you that this actually is true and have the tables. So we're going to switch out of presentation mode into conference table mode. And in conference table mode, I want you to answer the questions that I have listed up here. First one is, what areas do you want to be reskilled in during 2020? So I'll retype these. If they're actually on the following, they're in conference mode. If you look up at the discussion questions at the top of the screen, you'll see them. But the second question is, what impact could it have on your life and those with whom you work if you were to reskill yourself in these areas? And I recommend that you look at hard skills, soft skills, self-care skills, self-learning skills, that you go for the whole gamut and get as many questions answered as you can. We're going to have you share for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to bring you back here. Just a little tip before you go. This is what the conference mode looks like. And the most important part to pay attention to is at the bottom where you see the yellow dot. That's where you turn your camera on and your microphone. So if you join a table and you realize that they're not hearing you, just look to the bottom of the screen and look to these 2 buttons. Those are the 2 most important buttons. So I'm going to take us off presentation mode, and we're going to automatically flip over into conference table mode, and then I'll bring us back in about 15 minutes time. Guys, remember the questions. Don't forget them. I'll put them in the chat.
Please, could you remind us?
Sure. I'll put them back in the chat. Whoops. There we go. What areas do you want to be reskilled in during 2020? And what impact could it have on your life and those with whom you work? Was really the right way to say that. Okay, we're going to flip over. Let's go. Hold on to your horses. Okay, here we